Hello and welcome to His Purpose Prevails. My name is Pam. The name of this podcast comes from the Bible verse Proverbs 19:21 that states, "Many are the plans in a person's heart, but it is the Lord's purpose that prevails." The reason I chose this name is because of my many life experiences and the many hats that I wear. This podcast is an integration of all parts of me. I am a Christian, I am Hmong, I am a woman, I am a mental health therapist, a wife, a daughter, and so much more. The topics that I speak on will be related to these different parts of me and may be relatable to you as well. I invite you to join me as I and other speakers share our experiences, offer wisdom, messages of hope, or just a different perspective. I found that it does not matter what hat I wear, what I do, what hardship comes my way, the Lord can use it to give my life purpose. And in the end, it is His purpose that prevails. Let's get into the podcast. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the podcast. As you can see, today I have on another special guest. I'm really delighted to have Thong here today. First of all, he's a male, so I've had a lot of women on the podcast, but I think it's so important to hear from our brothers as well because we're going to talk about something a little bit heavy. We're going to talk about suicide in the Hmong community, especially related to our Hmong brothers. Just a disclaimer, this is a heavy topic. And so if you need to pause, if you need to step away, if you need to call somebody, please make sure that you're doing what you need. The podcast can wait. You can always come back once you've regrouped. So I also want you to know that you can call or text 988, which is the Lifeline support. You can go to your local crisis center if you're feeling unsafe, like you may harm yourself or harm another person. You can also go to the emergency room or call 911. And so those are just some of the options for you if you're listening and you feel unsafe. So Thong and I, we kind of met through WACMA, and it was this topic. It was regarding suicide prevention and awareness, and there were a few speaking engagements that we had shared, and that's kind of how we met. And so there have been more and more suicides among males within the Hmong community, and I just thought this topic was really important to talk about. And so I invited my brother Thong here. He also has a podcast and a Facebook page called Thong Xiong Talks, correct? Awesome. And then we will put that in the description and link that there so you are able to connect with Thong if you would need to. But thank you, Thong, so much for agreeing to be on this podcast today.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm excited, and it's you don't hear that about suicide prevention, but when we talk about that, I think we have to really actually talk about it instead of not just pushing it under the rug or pushing it aside. We have to really make this a conversation. So I appreciate you giving me the time and inviting me onto your podcast to kind of speak a little bit about this.
Absolutely. Thong, why don't you start out by telling us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm a refugee, right? I came to the United States as a refugee. I was born in the United camp. I came to the US when I was right around 3 or 4 years old. So coming to a new land, new atmosphere, re-engaging myself and everything like that was difficult as I grew up, growing up in gangs and violences in North Minneapolis. Eventually my parents saw that we were kind of getting a little bit too rowdy. So we kind of moved around a bit. We moved to Florida for about 10 years, and then we moved back to Minnesota. And that was when I kind of really started engaging myself into the community. But overall, I joined the military at that time, and military is where I really engulfed into this topic, right? Because we have a very, very high rate in the military, and the majority of them are men. And so in the military, I was able to give some hip pocket classes, is what we call them, to talk a little bit about suicide prevention to the military personnel, the Marine Corps personnel that I was in charge of. And so then from there, after my time in the Marine Corps, I got out of the Marine Corps. I went to Fox Valley Technical College, got my degree in early childhood education. And then in UW Green Bay, I got my bachelor's degree in organizational leadership. Now working on my master's degree in leadership and organizational development at Lakeland University. So a lot of my degrees are in leadership, but I am very passionate about, helping the community and connecting with the youth and helping them through a lot of things. And, creating Hmong Youth Program for Excellence here in the Fox Cities to kind of help these kids, especially middle school kids. I see them as like the middle child who's forgotten. And sometimes the middle child who is forgotten, they get lost in the conversation. And so helping them understand what it means to be Hmong American, not necessarily just Hmong, but what it means to be Hmong American because they grew up in the US, they were born and raised here in the US. And so helping them understand that. And I think that's a very, very important aspect of their life to figure out who they are, what their identity is. Because if they can't fit in, sometimes, and a lot of the times they do result to the suicidal ideations, is because they don't fit in anywhere. And so Hype is there to kind of help them understand what it means to be more American and where can they fit in and finding their identity before they get into high school, where a lot of the stuff can happen in the high school time frame. So middle school is where they kind of get lost. I saw there was not a lot of programming for our middle school kids. There was not a lot of clubs, organizations for our middle school kids. And so Hype is there to kind of help them to understand what it means to be more American and what their true identity is. So I do a lot of that, do some speaking engagements talking about identity and helping people find their passion and figure out what their, like Simon Sinek said, their why, right? What is your why in life? And how do you present that to everybody? So doing a little bit of that on the side as well. I did dabble in a lot of things too. So I'm a real estate agent with a creative results team here in Wisconsin. And so there's a lot of things that I do, but overall is to kind of help others. That's kind of the biggest thing that I would love to do is just helping people.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing. I relate to the middle child thing because I am a middle child. I'm the second youngest, but it still feels like the middle child. So yeah, I love what you're doing. Let me know how I and the viewers can support you with that too. But I think it's really important to have people who look like us in leadership roles and actually giving back to the community. And I hear that you're doing that. So you have a heart for the Hmong community and for those who have suicidal ideation and for the youth. And those are all really great, amazing causes. So thank you. It's so important, I think, for males to have mentors growing up. And I don't see that. I see it in the Hmong community, but it's more so I feel like in the ways of like teaching you Hmong tradition and choking and all of these different things, right? But I don't really see it a whole lot. And so I know that our Hmong brothers, they definitely need more mentors. And so I really love that you're out there and you're sharing knowledge.
Yeah, and I think going off of that, we talk about the aspect of what we need to do as Hmong men, right? What are our responsibilities? When I got married, and so my father-in-law had to kind of teach me, right? Growing up, we lived in kind of like, I guess we lived a little comfortable, right? People did that for us. And so the fact that when I got married and my father-in-law was like, oh, I'm like, okay, this is like my first time doing it. And so, you know, it was different for me, right? Learning all of that. But growing up, I didn't have that type of mentorship. I had the mentorship of how to be a leader, right? How to work for your community and to help the love and the passion for the community. I got all of that. But there's also other underlying things that men should know, right? Like you say, like chokkainglo, wedding traditions, funeral traditions, and stuff like that. There are a lot of things that we have to be able to learn or to know. And so I see a lot of youth, and especially some of the men or the boys, they stray away from that because maybe that's not the responsibilities that they want. But a lot of times it is forced upon them, saying that you need to learn this, right? You have to go learn this. And so instead of like just forcing it upon them, help them understand why it's important. 'Cause I didn't understand the importance of learning about all of this stuff until I was a lot older. And I wish there was somebody who taught me, or maybe it was taught to me in a way that I didn't understand.
Sure.
So I'm pretty sure it was taught to me, but in a way
Hmm.
that I couldn't understand it. And so if we learn how to break it down, like what I do with Hype is like we break it down. We have
Hmm.
questions from some of our youth. It's like, why does my parents always do this? Or why do they force me to do this? And a lot of the times our parents growing up, it's the way that they learned how to teach us. And when
Hmm.
they say, oh, uh, and we'll be like, well,
Hmm.
why do I have to do this? Like, don't worry about it, just do it. And so we
Yeah.
get so frustrated. It's like, why am I even doing this? I don't understand why, but okay, I'm gonna do it. But I think if
Hmm.
we can fix that understanding, oh, you're doing this because of A, B, and C, right? We're doing this
Hmm.
because of D, E, and F. And so if they understand it a little more, I think they will be more in tune to learning it. Um, and so that's why there's a lot of pushback, I think, from the boys in that generation.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you for bringing up. That's a very important point. So what I'm hearing is that our parents, they have a set way of doing things that they've learned, and then they're teaching us now we're in America and they're teaching us some of those same traditions and about the culture, but we don't always understand it and we're just expected to do it, right? Because as kids, we have to respect your elders, listen to what they say, 少讲要 don't talk back. So a lot of the youth now are kind of confused, like, okay, well, why do I need to learn this or why do I need to do this? And so I love having you on because I can't speak on a male's perspective, but I want to talk about more of the challenges. I feel like I was talking to Dr. Dia Cha, who's an anthropologist, and she talks about us being born into roles, right? And like, there's traditional gender roles, but everybody kind of knew their place. Everyone knew like what their roles were. Women would child rear, they might oliote, they do the cooking, and then even the kids would help out. Like they would watch the siblings and feed, the animals on the farm. But then men, they were born into their roles and they were to learn like the traditions, the cultures, be able to do negotiations, right? Like and all of those things, right? What to do at funerals, like you said, what to do at weddings, how to be a and so there's a lot of challenges that Hmong men have. And I think about those nowadays of our youth who struggle with social anxiety. So if you have social anxiety, but your parents are requiring you to go out there and to talk and to learn all these rules and all of these traditions, and you're supposed to be the one to untangle, you have to go on. Like it's just a lot, I think, for among male, but I want to hear more on your perspective of just the different pressures, expectations, and challenges.
Yeah, and I'm also a middle child. So, and I think like a lot of that pressure does fall on the oldest brother, right? It's that
Hmm.
oldest son mentality that everybody has. And then you talked a little bit about how we respect our elders, right? And so
Hmm.
like, yeah, something that we always say is like, oh, you just what the oldest brother does or what the oldest sibling does, then we kind of just follow and we support. And so sometimes we don't learn all of that, and it puts a lot of pressure on the oldest brother. And I see it from my
Hmm.
oldest brother, my brother-in-law,
Hmm.
the oldest brother-in-law. It's like there's so much pressure on them that they had to
Hmm.
learn everything, but at the same time, they have to take care of the younger brothers and the younger siblings. And then, if dad's not around, because my dad passed away, and now it all falls down to my oldest brother. Like he is the kind of like the new man of the house, right? And
Right.
so he should be able to pick up where my dad left off. But if your dad has this really high status that everybody
Hmm.
looks up to, how do you live up to that? And everyone is expecting you to live up to that. And then you still have to take care of your wife. You still have to take care of your kids. You still have to take care of your mom, right? Because in our culture, we
Hmm.
don't believe in putting our elders in like a home, right? We
Hmm.
believe that they will either stay with the oldest son or the youngest son, right?
Right.
And so the pressure of being the oldest man in the house, that hits hard. And so I know I've seen my brother struggle with a lot of that stuff. I've seen my brother-in-law struggle with that stuff because on both sides, I lost my father-in-law. I also lost my father. And so now they have to take the totem, and it's hard for them. And I see the stress that they have to go through. And so one thing is, I think one of the hardest thing too is as a younger brother, you want to help as much as you can, but 'cause you sao hla thế na, right? You don't want to
Yeah.
just go in there and start changing things and start doing things because we also have to respect their wishes and what they can and are capable of doing. And so then that puts the pressure on me. It's like, well, I want to help my brother so much, but do I wait for him to ask, right? Or if I see him suffering, should I just ask, right? And then it goes into, when we're talking about suicidal ideations, because they're the oldest, they have to hide that, right? Because we're men, we have to hide that because we feel that that is a weakness. When we talk about things like that, especially as a husband and a father, I cannot show that to my wife and my kid. And they're like, oh, well, dad's supposed to be the Superman, right? He's supposed to be able to do everything, right? He has to go to work, bring in the money, but then on the weekends, join, Jakuti, go join in the community and go help the community. And then you get a lot of those pressure too. And so it's like, how do you balance that life with the family and then also life with your Guti, na? And I think in the Hmong community, we talk about Guti a lot to be even stronger than your family. Oh, có chỉ một Guti, giờ thì cái gì xí này, giờ cái tụi kids, your bốn nhà, rồi cái tụi kids your gì, rồi tên nữa này, the Guti has to help, right? If it's the Guti, they're not gonna help you, right? And I think we have a lot of that pressure. And I'm not saying that the pressure is not on the women too, because when we go out there and we have to do that, right? Your wife automatically becomes nepatan, right?
Yeah.
And so then she has these responsibilities as your wife to, um, for any event, they had to help with the cooking and all that stuff, and the men had to do all of this stuff as well. And so it's like if I go into the community and I do all of this, now I'm also putting that pressure on my wife, right? And sometimes that pressure on her, it's like, well, I don't even want to do it. Why did you go in and do it? It's like, but I have to also help the community so that they can help our family. It's like, well, I don't want to do it. Now it becomes a friction. It becomes it caused friction in the relationship, and it caused friction in that it's supposed to be me and you, but now you're going to do all of this stuff. And then now the pressure is on, okay, now my wife is mad at me, but I have to go with your kuti. But if I don't go with Jakuti, now they're going to be mad at me, and then I can take care of my family. And so, where do we draw the line of, okay, men, it is okay to say no to Jakuti and go take care of your family first and take care of yourself first. That's the biggest part. Is like we feel that if I stop going to help Jakuti or I stop helping my family, my wife and my kids, now I'm selfish. It's like, hey, what are you doing? You're the man of the house. You're supposed to be doing this, 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 and this. So no matter how stressful I am, no matter how hard life is getting, I still have to cater towards the other people in my life first before I can cater towards me, right? And that's just from a men's perspective, is that is a lot of pressure to do it. And so, for example, I think my first experience of suicide with one of my brothers in arm, right? And he was having issues with his wife and her side of the family and all that stuff. And so I'm like, dude, take some time for yourself, right? Take some time for yourself and like understand why you're going through these feelings. And it's okay to feel, but society tells us it's not, right? That we're supposed to hold it in, that you are a man. Men don't cry, we don't get emotions and stuff like that. And you're supposed to be strong for everybody else. But how can you be strong for somebody else when you are breaking down yourself? And if you are breaking down yourself, it leads to a lot more arguments because one little thing can set you off. When you're not in that mental state of mind and you just don't want to have that conversation, it will set you off. And so for my friend, he was such he has so much responsibility. There was so much stuff going on in his life. And one little thing that his wife said throws him off. And then eventually she left him,
Okay.
and when she left him, he felt like his world just kind of deteriorated. And then they're like, well, you leave right? It's like, well, I love
Mm-hmm.
my kids. There's
Mm-hmm.
other girls out there you can go get. Yeah, but I love my son. I love my daughter. It's like I want to see them. And Jakuti is like,
Mm-hmm.
don't worry about them. And I'm just
Yeah.
like, well, what about our perspective? We love our kids. Like if
Right.
my daughter was ever taken away from me, I don't know how I would live, right? It's one
Yes.
of those things where I'm so passionate about that, but sometimes that doesn't come across, and a lot of people say, "Oh, don't worry, there's more girls out there."
Mm-hmm.
Kids, start over. Why do I want to start over when I have this already? And so now you just love somebody that was there for you because and that they will
Mm-hmm.
support you through all of it. But at the end of the day, when all of that breaks apart, you as a man are the only one going through that. And yes,
Right.
they understand, but everybody copes with the situation differently.
Mm-hmm.
And so the way that he coped with it was suicidal ideations. And so
Yeah.
if I can't see my kids, then I don't deserve to be a man, right?
Right.
know, grow. And so what does he lean towards? It's like, I'm not
Mm-hmm.
worth anything now. My wife is gone. My kids are gone. Now I'm so alone.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody's just yelling at me, saying that I messed up here. I messed up here. Well, you should have done this. You should have done that. And I think that's something in the Hmong community that we don't do really well. Is that
Right.
we pile
Mm-hmm.
more stuff on. It's like, oh, it's your fault. You should have done this. You should have done that,
Yeah.
right? And we don't
Right.
sit there and we don't communicate with them. It's like, hey, how are you feeling? Let's
Mm-hmm.
talk about it. Let's really get down to why you're feeling this way and how can we
Right.
support you to become better. But instead, we just put more stuff on there. It's like, well, maybe you should have done this instead.
Yeah, let's stop right there because I
Yeah.
think that's so important. I talk about Hmong women and getting a lot of victim blame and shame, but I'm hearing like Hmong men, they experience that too. So when you're in a pickle or like a conflict or have a problem, they often will blame you and say, "Got dololi," or
Mm.
you didn't do what I said. Or like you said, if you're saying I don't want to lose my kids, they're saying, "Oh, your kids are replaceable. Just go have other kids." But I hear that a lot of the Hmong males don't get validated, right? Because they're not supposed to feel, they're not supposed to be sad. So no one says, "Yeah, I know this is really hard. Yeah, it hurts. Yeah, it's scary." But instead, they try to offer you all these solutions, which doesn't help because then it just further invalidates and dismisses your pain and what you're going through. But I'm hearing you say, like, we need to sit with people and we need to talk with them and say, you know, I get it. Like, why are you feeling this way? And just spending that time, I think, to make them feel heard and seen and understood can be so powerful.
Yeah, absolutely. And with all the experiences that I had with my brothers who have had these ideations, it's a lot of just they want to know that somebody there is still there that cares about them. That's the
Hmm.
biggest thing. A lot of the people experiences that I've gone through, and even myself, right? A few years ago, 4 years ago, we lost our son, right? And so during that time, I was still shaman during that
Hmm.
time, right? And so like, you talk everything that you can, right? To kind of help and support and give you an answer of why this happened. And so when I was there, my son passed a month into it. And even before he passed away, they were already talking about what to do with the funeral. You know,
Oh,
it's not like, okay, he's still here, but we know that he's not going to make it. And yet we're already talking about what we're going to do for the funeral, right? Because he's so little.
yeah.
He never came home, right?
Hmm.
So or how they say like or bring it into the family spiritually.
Mm.
And
Okay.
so then when the funeral conversation was coming on, it was like, oh well, there's not really anything that we do with kids in those situations. And when I asked them, it's like, okay, what do we do? And they're like, just give it to the hospital. And whatever the hospital does with them, that's it, you know? But to me, he was in our life for a year. And that's so, not a year, a month. And that's so inconsiderate. Like, he was breathing and he was doing all of this, you know? And so to tell me that just give it to the hospital and whatever they do it, then that's just how it does. Well, guess what? The hospital was a church hospital, right? And so we decided to just do a church ceremony for our son. And so then that night I came and I sat and I'm like, I lost all faith. I lost faith in, you know, shamanism, Buddhism, God, everything. And I sat on the couch that night and I put both my hands up and I say, okay, I'm free. Whoever out there can come to me tonight or whenever and tell me that, give me an answer of why things happened the way they did. I was at the lowest and the darkest part of my life. And everybody around me was like trying to find excuses to say it's not your fault, but at the same time, there were some that were saying, well, it's your fault, you know?
Yeah.
There was people saying that, well, maybe because of the name that you guys gave him. Maybe it was because you guys went and played at the lake, you know, like we live in the Ja and stuff like that, right? And it's like, well, then it's your fault because you went to the lake. It's your fault because you gave him that name. And it's like, well, can't you just say, I understand what you're going through.
Right.
I might not be able to understand everything that you're going through, but just know that I am here for you when you need it. You get some of that, but it's the people that in your life that you really want to ask, you know, your mom, your dad, your brother, your sister, colleagues, your best friends to come and say, hey, we know what you're going through. It might be really, really hard for you right now, but just know we're here to support you. And it's just that, just being there for those individuals, knowing that they were there for me would have been nice. And so I went through this and, you know, it was dark. I had some suicidal ideations. You know, there were some times when I would drive on a bridge. I was just like, you know what, if I just drove off this bridge right now, right, into the lake, into or whatever it is, right? That's a big fall. Maybe if I fall, something, you know, what would happen, right? Then all this pain would just go away. But then I thought about my daughter and I thought about my wife. And nobody during that time asked me the question that we should ask, right? And when you're in that situation, when somebody asks you, have you thought about killing yourself? That just opens up everything. And it shows that somebody cared. Someone cared enough to ask me that you're going through so much. And so I want to let you know that I'm here. And that question right there would have helped me with a lot of stuff. So excuse me, being a little emotional here, but I get it. I didn't get that. And so then that night I closed my eyes and I just prayed that somebody would come and give me answers. And you know what? I had a dream, you know, in those dreams, in those moments where you feel like you're half asleep, right? But you know you're sleeping, but you're also awake. And so I dreamt that God came to me and we had a full conversation, you know. I talked to him like, you know, what do people, oh, I asked him, oh, are you God? And he said, some people call me that. Some people call me God. Some people call me Father. People call me this and that. And so we talked a little bit and he gave me, you know, I asked him some questions that I've always wanted to ask God, you know. And so then he was talking to me and he showed me this vision, this little vision of my son holding hands with him and holding hands with my dad who passed away. And they were walking up these stairs. And I've never heard my son talk because he was in the NICU. And so all he did was just kind of, he had a tube the whole time that he was with us. So he never talked, he never cried. And so that vision that I had a conversation with God, and my son turned to God and said, did I do a good job? And God said, you did. You did what you needed to do. And so right there kind of made me, I was still kind of confused, right? Because if God loved me this much, why
Mm-hmm.
did he take my son away from me?
Mm-hmm.
And it wasn't until like 4 or 5 months after the incident that I sat down and I talked to one of my brothers, my half brother, right? My half
Mm-hmm.
brother, then my half side of the family, they all go to church, right?
Okay.
And so I talked to my half brother and he said, people go through their whole life, especially Christians that want to talk to God and
Mm-hmm.
want an opportunity to be closer to God. And you
Mm-hmm.
got the opportunity to actually sit there and talk to him. So that's
Yeah.
amazing. And so he told me one thing that I will always remember, and I share this with everybody who might feel like they're lost. I
Okay.
share it with people who might feel like they're alone. And he told me that, in your life, when everything is good,
Mm-hmm.
right? Do you call on your mom or your dad? When life is so good, we
Mm-hmm.
forget to call our parents or we forget to call, God. But
Mm-hmm.
it's when we hit rock bottom, that's when we call to him. And
Yes.
I actually was looking for a Bible verse to put on my wall today, and it says, "The Lord is near to the brokenhearted and saves the crushed in spirit." Right, Psalms 34:18, and
Yes.
that is one of those things where he is nearest to all of us when we are brokenhearted. Right, he's always there with us, but then I think he just wanted me to reach out to him finally and come back, and it took him taking
Mhm.
my son to realize that I needed to go back to him. And
Yes.
so after that, I kind of devoted myself, born again Christian. And then the year after that, I got baptized and became a full Christian. And so I think the biggest thing out of that was when somebody is in their dark place,
Mm-hmm.
a lot of time finding faith in something can really help you out of that.
Mm-hmm.
But I think the biggest thing for me was I just wish somebody would have told me, have you thought about killing yourself? Because that showed me they cared enough to ask that. Because when we ask that question, I think a lot of people are afraid to ask that question is
Yeah.
because they're afraid of the responsibility, right? Well, what if I did ask that question and they say yes? What do I do now? Right? Now I
Yeah.
have to spend time with them. I have to sit there on days and nights to talk to them and to watch them every minute, every second of the day so they don't do that. That's a lot
Right.
of responsibility to put on somebody. But that's why we do QPR training, right? You
Mm-hmm.
question, you persuade, and you refer. You don't
Right.
need to have all the answers.
Mm-hmm.
What you do is you need to show them that you care, that somebody
Right.
on this planet cares about them enough to ask them that question so
Mm-hmm.
that they can come off of that ledge. And when
Mm-hmm.
they're off of that ledge, you persuade them and you talk to them and say, hey, would you be okay if we go and talk to a counselor? Would it
Mm-hmm.
be okay if we go talk to a professional who knows what they're doing? Because I might not have all the answers to help you, but there are
Right.
people who are out there that can. And if you need a help and you need somebody to walk you there, somebody to drive you there, somebody to help you get there, apply for it, whatever it is that needs to be
Mhm.
done, let me be that person for you, and I'm gonna walk you there hand in hand.
Right.
That's really all it is. But I think a lot of people are so afraid that, well, what if they say yes? What do I do then? Just know that you don't have to have all the answers. Nobody has all the answers. Even counselors, they don't have all the answers because
Right.
everybody goes through different situations differently.
Right.
And so to be
Yeah.
able to just understand that people are going through that. And again, when I was going through that, I just wanted somebody to ask me that question because it
Mm-hmm.
showed me that they cared. Nobody
Mm-hmm.
did, but I
Mm-hmm.
found God, and God really just kind of pulled me out of that. And so faith is very, very important as well to help you pull you out of those situations. But also faith, you I guess how to say, you can't really see faith, right? It's there. You just have to believe in it. It's like in Small Soldiers, it's like the wind.
Mm-hmm.
You can't see it, but you can feel it. It's there. That's how you can explain faith, right? You can't see a person's faith, but you can feel it by the way they talk about it, how passionate they are in the things that they do. Just like the wind, you feel the wind there, but you can't see that the wind is there.
Right.
So faith does really help, but sometimes some people they need that physical being. They need that
Mm-hmm.
physical thing there saying that I am here. I am physical, I am living. You can touch me, you can feel me, we can hug it out, and
Right.
I am here. And some people need that.
Right.
And so when you ask that question, that's when you give yourself that that physical form of support.
Okay. So you're telling people don't shy away from asking that hard question of like, hey, have you thought about killing yourself? Because it shows people that you care. And also you're saying that they don't need to carry the burden, like, because people get afraid if I ask and I know and they tell me now I have to hold this big secret or it's this responsibility. And you're saying no, you talk to them, you give them options, you support them, you let them know, hey, I'll drive you here, hey, we can go talk to this counselor. I can see if I can get you help. And so for you, you really wanted someone to ask you how you're doing, or have you thought about that? And I think human connection is so important. I think, God created us to be in connection with other people. Um, and oftentimes when I have clients who are suicidal, a lot of the depression symptoms will go away after they've told their story and after they've been validated of like, that was really hard, right? I'm not your mom. I'm not your dad. I'm not going to blame you for the trauma or the negative experiences or the hard events that have happened, right? And so just hearing somebody listen one of the very common things with suicidal ideation is this like cloud of despair, this pit of hopelessness, right?
Mhm.
Like look at, there's nothing else they can do, right? And they're very tunnel vision and it's very dark. But like Jesus is the light, right? He is the hope
Mhm.
of all the earth. And I love that Bible verse that you pulled up. So yes, people need human connection. You are one of the very few that actually got to have this conversation with God where he revealed himself to you in that way. But those of us that believe in Christ, we can be the light for other people, right? And we can help others. So I think everything you just touched on is so important.
Yeah, yeah. And talking about that too is I had an encounter recently and somebody said, well, what if your family, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Because we always think that, especially the older brothers or the older sisters, the older siblings, it's like, well, I don't want to put this on my younger brothers and sisters. Like they're going through a
Mm-hmm.
lot already. I don't want to put this on my mom and my dad. And so I had one person ask me, it's like, well, hey Tong, what if it's your older siblings and you have to ask them that question?
Mm-hmm.
I feel like if I ask them that question, they're gonna lie to me because they don't want that burden on me.
Mm-hmm.
But I will say this, when I was going through it, the people I wanted to ask me the most was my siblings, right?
Okay. Mm-hmm.
Because they are my siblings. And I know that, like we always say, blood is thicker than water, right? That um, they're
Mm-hmm.
and we know that no matter how bad things get, they will always love you. And they
Mm-hmm.
would always ask you the question, but nobody did. And so I feel like somebody, and so, I wish somebody would have, especially those who you feel should love you, right?
Mm-hmm.
Unconditionally, the ones that should love you unconditionally should be the first people to ask you how you're doing and to ask you what you're going through and to actually sit there with you. And
Mm-hmm.
so to anyone that they feel, well, I don't want to ask my brothers and sisters because maybe they're gonna lie to me and they're gonna not tell me. They are waiting for you to ask them
Mm-hmm.
because you are the ones who are supposed to love them unconditionally, right? They're your
Right.
brothers and your sisters, your mom, your dad, your uncles, your
Mm-hmm.
aunties, your nieces and nephews. They want to know that at least, even if people outside my friends, people outside my family, if they don't ask me, it's whatever
Mm-hmm.
because they don't love me unconditionally. But my family loves me so unconditionally, they should
Mm-hmm.
be asking me this. They should be
Sure.
the ones who should be here to support me through these dark times. And yet nobody asked me. And I think it's because of the fear of that. And
Mhm.
so I never got that I never thought about that perspective of the ones who have to ask the question, especially family members. And so just know that when somebody that you love dearly is going through things like this and knowing the signs, right? We talk about the signs of, maybe they're depressed, their mood has changed. They used to be very social, now they're not, giving away things that they truly care for, you know,
Mhm.
and now
Mhm.
they're changing all of those aspects of themselves. When you start to see those signs, it's okay to ask the question. You're supposed to don't beat
Mhm.
around the bush. Because when you beat
Yeah,
around the bush, it also means that you don't really want to have that responsibility. And then they feel like, oh, well,
sure.
this person doesn't care enough to ask me.
Mhm.
Just ask.
Yeah.
One of those things where you should just ask.
One of my clients, I think there's a book called like How Are You Doing Really or something like that. And
Yes.
I think we always ask like, "Hey, how are you?" And it's a greeting. It's just like hi. It doesn't mean anything, right? And people are like, "Oh, I'm fine, good. How are you?" It's very surface, very quick. And I remember, I think I had asked my father-in-law, my husband's dad who passed away, but I had said something like, "Oh, 你要中几?" And he was like, "Oh, 几年中里啊." And I was not expecting that. And so I didn't have, this was not when I was a therapist. This was like probably 2 years into our marriage. And so and so he opened the door for me to find out more. But like I just didn't know what to say,
Mhm.
and I didn't even know how to say like, oh, 我讲了，几个黑文字，我讲几年中, but I didn't even know how to do that. And then like even looking back this day, I'm like, it could have just been as easy as like, tell me what's going on, right? And I didn't even ask that. And so I think like a lot of us we use the how are you as a greeting, but if we could say no, really, how are you, and give a person the space to really share, I think, yeah, it means the world. It shows that you care. But I'm hearing you say like you wanted that from your siblings because those are the people you grew up with. Those are your blood. Those are people who should know you well. And in that moment of hardship and despair and some of the grief you were having, nobody asked you like, "Hey, have you been thinking about killing yourself? Have you had thoughts of suicide?"
Yeah. Yeah. And it's tough to, and especially men, right?
Mm-hmm.
Right. It's hard to ask men, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because we we do feel like we shouldn't tell anybody, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because that makes us look weak,
Mm-hmm.
inferior. And so if there are guys out there who are listening, I want you to know that doesn't make you weak, right? If anything, it makes you courageous, right? The fear, because the definition of courage is not the lack of fear. The definition of courage is having fear, but learning how to overcome that. That is courage. Having the
Right.
courage to overcome your fear. That's what courage means. And
Yeah.
courage is so respectable,
Mm-hmm.
right? If you just want respect, have courage. Okay,
Yeah.
have courage to show your emotions. Have the courage to ask for help. And men, we don't ask for help, right? I still do
Right.
that sometimes. Like, hey, we're lost. Oh, well, I'll figure it out, right?
Uh-huh.
No, let's stop at a gas station. Let's ask for directions. Like, no, 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 I got this, right?
Right.
And so we have that. We should know everything. We should know it all. As a man, I should know everything, right? Because society tells us that if we don't know it, then who's gonna know it, right? In a family.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
so when we actually talk about it, and that's the stigma is that we don't talk about it. Men
Mm-hmm.
don't tell their feelings. They don't share what's going on in their life, right? And the other thing too is that in the Hmong community, we don't like to share because
Mm-hmm.
we talk about this all the time. But like, I can tell you guys something that happened today, and Takina, people in Thailand is gonna know about it.
Yeah.
This Hmong tea stuff is like
Uh-huh.
the next day somebody's gonna learn about it. Somebody's gonna know
Mm-hmm.
about it. The whole community is gonna know about this.
Right.
And so that's what we're scared of. We don't want to show
Sure.
that emotion. We don't want to show that we need help because, oh, this person's gonna go tell this person. Oh, and then everybody's gonna look at you. It's like this guy's not a man, you know.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
That guy's
Yeah.
not a man. And I watched this one video and this one, I think it's a clip from a movie. I don't remember where I think not Powell, where his Nutunyana
Mm-hmm.
ran away. And so he is this guy who Numu Dagteming. He's the
Mm-hmm.
one that goes and gets everybody their wives back, right? Or
Mm-hmm.
their nyas back and stuff like that. And so then he takes Sa, right, to go get his nya back, and he
Uh-huh.
couldn't do it. And so when they came back, his wife was like, you know, you are able to go out and get everybody else's. Có thứ cái chơi này, có thứ cái kinh này, có thứ mù hại tao lửa tụ cho bọn nhiệt đã cá lò này, ở chả có tụ nhá
Mm-hmm.
kia có thứ hại chỉ tao na, ở chả có cú
Yeah.
chăm họ luôn, right? Nên lên lần đó
Uh-huh.
thì có cả chim đã ties na, and don't call yourself a man.
Mm-hmm.
Có chỉ chỉ nên nhớ rồi, right? I'm so
Mm-hmm.
embarrassed of you because you couldn't do this, right? And it's
Yeah.
because of that societal and cultural pressure
Mm-hmm.
that we put on men that why couldn't you do this? You could do this for everybody else, but why can't you do it for your family? It's not that. Every situation is different, right?
Yeah.
And when we can't do something, don't you think that it hurts us more, right? And then
Right.
just biting at it and picking at it and picking at it is just going to make it worse. And so
Mm-hmm.
eventually, I think I'm pretty sure in this movie, he was talking about, and I think this part of the story talks about how he ended up, I believe, successfully suicide, right?
Okay. Sure.
And he leaves a story behind and a writing behind to them. And it's like, we see this and we
Mm-hmm.
make movies about this. But
Mm-hmm.
then I wonder how many people have actually seen that movie or seen that component of that movie and what that represents, the pressure
Right.
that men had to go through. Because he cries and he said, "Oh, yeah, then no, you guys can go out
Oh.
and find who else you think would be a good father for you. I'm tired.
Mm-hmm.
I'm gonna go rest now." Right.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
so sometimes we are very, very tired,
Mm-hmm.
but we still have to push through because society said you should never be tired. You
Mm-hmm.
shouldn't be emotional. You shouldn't cry. But it's okay. I'm gonna tell you this, it is okay to be emotional. It's okay to cry.
Yes.
Find the comfort in people who can understand that.
Mm-hmm.
And you'll see. You'll see that
Mm-hmm.
there are people out there who will understand that and they're not gonna bicker at you. They're not gonna tear you down even more. Right? Find the courage to overcome that fear of being vulnerable, the fear of being insignificant, or the fear of being weak,
Yeah.
and overcome that with courage. And let
Yeah.
me tell you, it's gonna help you a lot than you think, a lot more than you think.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I love how you said courage is not the absence of fear, right? Courage is really doing it afraid. So if you went and did something but you weren't afraid of it, then I can't say, well, Tong, you were courageous because you weren't even scared of it. But if you were scared of it and you did it and you overcame, then yes, that's courage because you're doing it afraid. And I
Yeah,
think you're right. We think if we ask for help, we're weak. We just, bema elunda, and we will just do it ourselves and we don't need anyone's help. But asking for help is courageous. Doing it alone isn't courageous. We need to be able to ask for help and to know that we're not alone. And it takes humility too. We got to
yeah.
swallow some of that
Hmm.
pride and be like, dang, I really need help. We got to know our limitations. We have to know ourselves personally. Um, don't have the pride to feel like you can't ask for help, and we make so many excuses like, well, they're busy, they have their own lives, but well, then get professional help, right? Maybe you need a therapist, maybe you need to go talk to a mentor, or maybe you need to go talk to a pastor or someone like that. But there is help out there, but it's those depressive thoughts that just say like, no one can help me, there's no use, it's worthless, it's hopeless. So
And
yeah.
then what do you do when people do ask you for help, right?
Yeah.
So like you mentioned earlier, when your father-in-law said, "Oh, what uh,
Yeah.
like you're stuck." So okay, now what do I do? Right? I wasn't
Mhm.
expecting that. And I think a lot
Right.
of times when we ask people, "How are you doing?" we're expecting everyone to just say, "Good." That's
Mm-hmm.
it. Because
Yeah.
when you say bad, okay, now what do we do?
Yeah.
It's a shock. It's like, wait, no, you're supposed to say good. You're not supposed to say bad. We're not supposed to continue this conversation, right?
Mhm.
And so
Mhm.
I've learned to, instead of, I think in a situation where you're just passing in the hallway or something and you're like, hey, how are you doing? Good, good, right? And you kind of keep
Mhm.
walking. But
Mhm.
when there's a situation where like somebody's coming to see you and sitting down and talking to you, I
Mhm.
would always advise people,
Mhm.
to ask open-ended questions instead, right? And
Mhm.
that's something that I've been working with my wife on to better
Okay.
our communication with each other.
Yeah.
So, you come home, it's a hard day. Yes, you just want to relax and whatever, right?
Mhm.
But they also probably had a hard day and just want to relax as well too. And so when you ask,
True.
how are you doing? You're expecting, oh, good. How was your day?
Mhm.
Good, right? And
Yeah.
so I've learned how to kind of keep a little bit of energy left in
Yes.
me. So on the days
Okay.
when I get home, instead of asking my wife, oh, how was your day? Right?
Mhm.
I'll ask her, tell me about your day. What did you do today?
Mhm.
Start from the
Mhm.
beginning. And every time there's sometimes she'll go, it was good. I was like, no, no, no. Tell me about your day.
Yeah.
Right? Even if
Yeah.
it's I woke up, I ate breakfast, I took a shower, I took the kids to school, and I came and I, cleaned the house a little bit. It's good to kind of get all of that off because sometimes it's good to just know that somebody cares for you enough to ask you to tell them about their day instead of how was your day. And so a
Mhm.
yes or no question can kill the conversation right away. But to continue the
Yeah.
conversation, try to implement more of how was your day and tell me about instead of how was your day, tell me about your day. Start from the beginning. What did you do when you
Mhm.
wake up? Right. And listen. That's the biggest thing about communication is listening, right? You actually have to sit there and listen. And the best way to show people that you are listening is to reiterate what they're saying, especially in
Mhm.
situations where people are having suicidal ideation, right? And you
Yes.
ask them, hey, have you thought about killing yourself? And they're like, yes, just last week, right? Then you're like, oh, wow, just last week? Tell me a little bit more. And, what can I do to support you, right? And then you talk to them, it's like, okay. And you listen to, so I see that you feel this way, right? I see that you're
Mhm.
feeling this way because of the situation. So making sure that they are heard also means a lot to them too,
Yeah.
because there could be people there who just listens and are on their phone, like I'm on
Mhm.
my phone, but don't worry, I'm listening. And then you're on your phone, it doesn't show that you're listening, but be attentive and actually be there for them. And so when people say,
Yeah.
I'm not doing too well, sit down with them and actually see if you can talk to them. And I know it comes with practice, it comes with experience, right? And so
Mhm.
if you think back about it and you're like, you know what, I guess I could have done that. I guess I
Yeah.
could have done that.
Mhm.
But now with a little bit more experience, I can do that. So
Right. So when we ask people how they're doing, we want to be intentional and we want to have space and give them time in the event that they don't say good. Right. And
mhm,
so close-ended questions are those that either end with a yes or no, or it's just a one-word answer, right? Like, did you like school today? Yes.
mhm,
Right. Versus how was school today or what did you do at school today? Then that's a open-ended question and it allows them to elaborate more. And so you're not shutting them down, you're actually opening up the conversation. And so making that time to say, like, if you're gonna ask someone how they're doing, don't be rushed, don't be busy. Like, give them time. Don't, ask them and then be intentional about what they may say. They may have a different reply other than good. And just being able to hold that space. So, I think like those of us that have done our own work, it's easier for us to hold space. But I think those of us that are detached from our own emotions, we don't know what to do because
mhm,
we don't even feel our own emotions. We can't even identify what we're feeling. So I think it's important to also do our own work, right? And
mhm,
to be able to identify our emotions. Why am I feeling this way? What does this mean? And then once we are able to identify what we're feeling, then we can tell other people. And then we can also hold that space for them too. So I feel like Bay Moma, we always try to find a solution and we don't like to talk about emotions. And so it's because we don't do our own work, right? When my husband and I first got married, I had a miscarriage and my mom went to the emergency room with me. She was there, physically present, physically supporting. And then when they told me that I would be having a miscarriage, I was crying on the drive home, and my mom was like, "Sakokoma." And she's like, in her mind, she's probably like, "Well, you're really young, so it's kind of a blessing that, you'll continue to go to school and, but she was just like, "Sakokoma." It's like it's not a big deal, very minimized, very invalidating, and that's not helpful, right? And so my mom didn't have the ability to hold space for my tears. And for her
Mhm.
to be like, yeah, you yin mo xie ma, and we didn't expect this to happen. But it was just like, "Tokokwa," you know, could pay, and she's giving me all these solutions and excuses. And like you said, like it's replaceable. You can have kids in the future, right? But that doesn't comfort you and that doesn't help
Right.
you. So we need to be able to do our own work and feel our own feelings. Because a lot of the times it's not the person, it's us, right?
Mm.
And so like if my friend is telling me, yeah, I've been thinking about suicide, and I have been thinking about suicide myself, and I don't want to go there and I don't want to talk about it, then it's going to be very uncomfortable. And
Mhm.
people can usually read like your cues, your nonverbals. They can, like, if you're uncomfortable or if you change the subject or if you say something off, then they already know. So, like, if
Mhm.
you're saying, yeah, I've been having thoughts of killing myself, and if someone makes a joke and it's like, we all have those thoughts. It's
Mhm.
no big deal. Then you're gonna feel minimized and you're not gonna want to open
Absolutely.
up. You're not gonna want to tell this person how you're feeling. So
Mhm.
we've got to do our
Yeah,
own work.
absolutely. That happens way too often, especially in like a group of friends, right?
Yeah.
Right. And being in the military, I saw a lot of that, right?
Hmm.
So in the military, like we will, be hanging out or something, and somebody was like, guys, it's been frustrating. I'm thinking about killing myself, right? And somebody would say, bet, right? Or no balls, right?
Yeah.
And it's very discouraging because these are the guys you're always around.
Hmm.
And yet here you're trying to subtly tell them
Hmm.
that you're going through some things and they take
Hmm.
it as a joke,
Hmm.
and so I've learned that when somebody says it, don't take it as a joke.
Hmm.
You know, maybe you can ask, hey, have you been really thinking about killing yourself? Right? Instead of just saying, stop lying, or there are some times where some people might say, oh, you're worthless, go kill yourself. Well, what if they
Yeah.
were thinking about that, right? I don't think that's
Right.
something that we should joke about a lot.
Right.
And so the words that we say, sometimes we do have to be careful with because
Right.
maybe they are going through a lot of stuff. And like you said, 被some of
Hmm.
ours are heavy. Some of
Yeah.
ours are very, very heavy, and it takes one person to say, hey, you know what? Go kill yourself because you're not worth anything. That could
Right.
happen because
Yeah.
they're carrying so much baggage. There's so
Hmm.
much pressure, so much stress that, it can lead them to that.
Hmm.
And then we talk a little bit about the aspect of what if you are one of your family members was successful in suicide?
Right.
The
Hmm.
effects that it has around everybody around you. And
Right.
I think I had suicidal ideations because I saw a lot of my friends who were successful at it. And I'm like,
Hmm.
hey, you know what? Maybe that is a way out.
Right.
And so because they were able to do it, I'm like, during that time when I was in my dark period, I was like, you know
Hmm.
what? This person did it and it seemed to solve their problem, but it doesn't
Yeah.
solve the problem of everybody around you afterwards. And so it
Right.
becomes a norm for the
Hmm.
family. And typically it's people who know that individual very closely that it's
Hmm.
going to make people around them. Um, and so you have to kind of keep an eye on those who has been through
Hmm.
traumatic events like that too. And they also need, feeling of talking and healing and stuff like that too, and helping them heal. Right. And
Right.
then we talking a little bit about what you said when your mom said, "我错过了," and
Hmm.
that doesn't it for us, huh? I'm just saying for myself,
Hmm.
it's not to
Hmm.
bash the elders, 那样,
Right.
because that was what they were taught, and that's
Mm-hmm.
what they went through, and that was the only thing they knew, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so when you say do self work, do your homework, right? Learn
Mm-hmm.
about what are other ways we can do it instead of the way that our parents did it to us. And so maybe
Right.
their parents did that to them. And so that was the only thing they knew.
Right.
And so, when my mom said a lot of that stuff to me, was I angry? Absolutely, because I was, but
Yeah.
afterwards, Kusana, I was like, hey, you know what? Mom only said that because probably somebody said it to her. Mom only
Mm-hmm.
said that because probably that's the only thing she knew.
Right.
But now we live in the US, we're a little bit more educated. We learn about all of this stuff about mental
Mm-hmm.
health and how to go around emotions and stuff like that. Educate yourself a little bit so that way we don't put that on our younger generation, right?
Right.
We have to stop that cycle by doing our homework and understanding
Right.
our own feelings, like you said. So that way we can talk to our younger generation and say, hey, you know what, we understand what you're going through. Even the boys, and I know this is a lot of pressure, and I know that you have to learn chokdang and get die and all this stuff, but I just want you to know that if you're going through a lot and there's a lot of pressure, please come talk to me. You
Right.
know, I want you to learn, absolutely, but I also want you to learn it in a way that it doesn't cause you mental health issues. It doesn't
Right.
cause you to go off the end. And so when you need
Yes.
to talk, come and talk to me, right? And so
Mm-hmm.
instead of just pressuring them to do it, you talk to them about doing it, but letting them know that when you have a lot of pressure on you, you can take a step back, and that's okay. It's okay to take
Mm-hmm.
a step back and to work on yourself for a little bit, be a little bit selfish. That's okay because
Yeah.
that class is going to be there when you're done taking care of yourself, right?
Right.
And
Yeah.
so let's not be like our parents. Well,
Mm-hmm.
be like your parents in a way that you like, but also don't be like your parents in a way that you didn't like, you know. Take the things that they taught you, but also leave the things that you feel wasn't that great of an experience for
Mm-hmm.
you and
Yeah.
create a new experience for your kids and for the youth
Mm-hmm.
so that they don't feel the way that a lot of us do feel. Uh,
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you for that. I just want to touch on one more point and then we'll wrap up. But I kind of want to talk about trust. So, a lot of the times we think about trust being the other person's responsibility, right? So, like, if I talk to my friend and she doesn't disclose my secrets, then she's trustworthy, right? Or if my husband lied to me, now he's no longer trustworthy. And I think we put a lot of pressure and expectation on the other person with trust. But I think like Bay Mona, we're very private, right? Like they told we're afraid of judgment or criticism. And so we don't like ask for help. And I think that we need to play our role in trust too. Because trust is, people doing and saying what they're gonna do and being consistent. That's how trust gets built. So I feel like for Moma, we need to learn how to trust more. I'm not saying, come on, talk to everybody or tell everyone your business and overshare, but there are specific people that God has placed in your life who can be a support. And so I was listening to this YouTube video or like those shorts and reels, and he was talking about trust being our job. We play a role in trust too when we open up and tell people things or when we ask for help, right? And so, like, if there's a person in my life and I'm struggling with suicidal ideation, me, I have to trust them. I have to offer that, like, olive branch, right? And I have to reach out and say, hey, I really need to talk about this. Can you make some time? Right. And if they can't make time, okay, well, then they're not trustworthy. But we also have a part in that. We have to own that part to ask for help. And then, then we're going to start getting our needs met by these people. And that's how we build a trust. But what I'm saying is, if you never ask for help, and you always think that everyone is untrustworthy, then you're not really helping yourself, right? And so sometimes we have to help ourselves, and sometimes we can't get help unless we help ourselves too, right? And ask for help. And so I think I just want to put that out there. Like it was very eye-opening to know like that's right. Maybe I feel like I don't trust people, but I'm also not asking for help and I'm not doing my part in, instilling that trust or gaining that trusting relationship.
Yeah, it's definitely a two-way street, right?
Yeah.
And a lot of times we feel like we always feel like, oh, I can't trust them. I can't trust
Mm-hmm.
them, right? And so, working in my line of work, I work in diversity inclusion services. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
I have to be able to build that trust between me and my students, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that they can tell me what are the things that they're going through at home. So that way I can find ways to get rid of those barriers so they can be successful, right? A
Yeah.
lot of times students fail college is because of external barriers, things that are going
Yeah.
on at home. And so if they come to college and they can't trust the people, their advisors and their counselors with the
Mm-hmm.
things that are going on at home, then how can we help them? And so to
Right.
build that safe environment and to build that trustworthy environment, right? And like you
Mm-hmm.
said earlier, oh, well, I can't trust this person because they're not making time for me when I really need it. Sometimes
Mm-hmm.
making time for the people who matters in your life
Mm-hmm.
builds that trust. And so, like you said, it's a two-way street, right? We have to be willing to trust people a little
Right.
bit more, 真些少呢?
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
then also, we had to also learn how to create an environment where people can trust us,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
And so
Absolutely.
then that's where the help could come in. It's like, I trust you enough that I can
Mm-hmm.
ask you for help in a very
Right.
personal way. And so, like you said, the people who like us who are more in tune with our emotions, or people who are okay with talking about their emotions, sometimes we are better at creating these environments for others
Mm-hmm.
because we are open to the emotions. And
Right.
sometimes that's how you create a safe space, is being open to the emotions, being open to what people are going to say and not say, how was your day, hoping for it was good. You
Yeah.
want to be able to create an environment where you ask them, how was your day? And you want to expect it was bad. So that way
Mm-hmm.
you can prepare for that. And so that also helps you build that trust. Because if you don't really want to know about people's day, just say good morning and walk away. When you
Sure.
don't have the time to actually sit there and talk to people and build that trusting environment, just say good morning and keep going. But
Yeah.
it's when you say, how are you doing? You've got to be ready for somebody to say, I'm not doing really well, right?
Right.
And
Yeah.
so there are ways and there are techniques and there are things that you can do to get yourself out of those situations, because maybe you are very, very, very busy. But
Mm-hmm.
then also at the same time, you have to understand, okay, I do have a little bit more time. Let me ask this person how they're doing and build that
Yeah.
trusting environment, you know,
Right.
because it is a two-way street. Like you say, trust is definitely a two-way street.
Yes. Thank you. All right. Well, Tong, you and I could probably go another hour or two. I'd love to
Absolutely.
have you back again, whether it's this topic or any other topic. Thank you so much for your vulnerability and kind of sharing your experience with suicide. And thank you for all the hard work that you're doing to help make our community healthier, and mental health is such a important topic. So again, thank you for the work that you're doing. To kind of wrap up, I'm gonna end us in prayer and then we'll end. Okay?
Perfect.
All right. Dear Heavenly Father, Lord, I just thank you so much for Tong and the work that he is doing. Father, I pray that you would surround him with people who can love and support him as he continues to be a beacon of light and hope to other people. Lord, I just pray that you would bring people into our path who need help, who need support, who need mentorship. I pray that, Lord, through Tong's work, through his podcast, through his speaking and education, Lord, that he would be able to rise up others, Lord, to be intentional about asking people how they're doing and to have these hard talks about suicidal ideation, Lord. Our hope is that suicide ends and that it stops. God, I just pray that this podcast would reach those who need to hear it. I pray, Lord God, that you would reach those who need to hear it, Father. Just like the work that you did with Tong, I know you can do that to anybody. Lord, I just ask that you reveal yourself to the hurting. Tong reminded us that you are near the brokenhearted and those who are crushed in spirit. And Father God, you promise to never leave us. You promise to never forsake us. So, Father, I just pray that those who are struggling with despair and sorrow and hopelessness, I pray that you would envelop them with your love, that you would show them who you are, your presence, your power, your glory, your healing touch, Father. We need you so much, God. And Father, I just pray that you be with Thong and all the viewers with their families. Send your angels to guard and protect them. I pray for divine interventions, Lord, whether it be your angels or other Christians or other people. If there are those that are hurting who are just wanting somebody to ask them how they're doing or to ask them if they've had suicidal ideation, Lord, send them those people, God. Lord, sometimes we can't do anything. We feel hopeless, but we know that, God, you can do anything. And so we just lift this podcast and all of the viewers and all those struggling with suicidal ideation. We lift them up to you right now. In the holy and mighty name of Jesus, we pray. Amen.